So, new Ipsos poll, and I think one might be able to say after you find out what's in here that this continues to be what we might call a trend. So, the new poll from Ipsos, released yesterday and conducted only a couple of weeks ago, so current, finds many Canadians feel less proud and positive about their country than they used to be. Is that a surprise? We're going to look back to and compare to a year ago and 5 years ago. Darrell Bricker is CEO of Ipsos Public Affairs. He is on the line. Darrell, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thanks for having me on, Aaron.
Let me go back to what I started with, which is this idea of, it's all well and good to say you conduct a poll nationally, and I think context obviously is very, very important here. So the numbers seem pretty grim. How do they compare? If you go back even a year ago.
Well, even a year ago, people were still not feeling great about their country, but certainly not as bad as it is now. But when you really see the numbers pop is when you go back to 5 years ago. And that's when at least 14% Canadians were actually about 14% more likely to say that we're proud of being Canadian than they are today. And that's, outside of an election period, you usually don't see numbers moving in double-digit directions. And this is one time that we did.
So that's 14%. Am I reading this right? Compared to over 35% now, so more than double?
Yeah, so it's 35% said they were less likely this time around, which is up 14% from the last time we asked it 5 years ago.
Okay, and then the other question in here, and maybe this is the one that seems a bit more glaring, at least when you see the headline, 7 in 10 Canadians, so that's 70% of Canadians think Canada is, quote, broken, unquote. And this is based on Pierre Poilievre basically saying the same thing and people buying in, right?
Yeah, and we asked a pretty tough statement. We said, do you agree with opposition leader Pierre Poilievre that Canada is broken? And there's not a lot of things that I would say that people would agree to the tune of 70% with Pierre Poilievre, but this is one thing that they do, indeed, that the country is broken.
You know, when I see that, and obviously we've heard Pierre Poilievre speak this way, I kind of wonder to myself, and I wonder how many people, and I'm sure you don't break this down, what does broken mean to people when you ask the question? Do we have any idea?
Well, we see it in other polls that we do, not necessarily specifically in this poll, but, we do a lot of polls on what Canadians are thinking, and I'd say there's two elements that come together here. One of them is how people are feeling about their day-to-day lives at the moment. They really don't feel that things are going great and that the Canadian promise is really playing out in their lives. The second thing is we spent better part of the last decade going back and taking a look at Canadian history and being pretty critical of it, really led by our political leaders, going back and saying, there's these things that need to be corrected, whether we need to, knock down statues or change the names of squares or whatever. So not really a message of, real universal support for Canadian identity heard through that. So I think those two things coming together are creating what you're seeing, and especially among younger Canadians who are, if it's 70% for the general population, it's 78% for younger Canadians.
Isn't that interesting, right? Because you think usually, younger Canadians typically don't really get involved politically, not to be able to answer a question like this, but to see that demographic be so, overly represented here, if you will, is it's a little shocking, especially when you consider, and maybe it's unfair, I didn't want to tie this into politics, but those young voters, an election ago or 2 elections ago, were Justin Trudeau voters.
Yeah, they certainly were. Now, those younger voters have obviously aged, and that was not just a short time ago. That was back in 2015. The Liberals haven't performed that great among younger voters, like in a real standout way in the last 2 election campaigns, but certainly in 2015. But the interesting thing about 2015 was that, yes, younger voter turnout was up, but turnout was up with every group of voters. So it was a pretty universal appeal that the Liberals had in 2015. Today, not so much.
Is there a regional breakdown to this at all? We always ask that because, of course, here in Quebec, we all think, we think we're very different from the rest of Canada. Is that something worth noting in here?
No, the place that's really feeling broken right now is Alberta. So if you go to Alberta and Saskatchewan, they're the people who are really feeling that the country is not working particularly well for them right now. There's always been that current, that undercurrent of concern about even the concept of Canada and the province of Quebec, but this is something different this time.
Yeah, I wonder, though, to that point, Alberta has kind of hinted at this as well. We know the fight between Danielle Smith and the federal government and Justin Trudeau as well. I think Quebec, at least Quebecers here who are nationalists, sometimes take solace in the fact that Alberta seems to be displaying the same kind of characteristics as us.
Yeah, and you can roll Saskatchewan in there as well. But it's not just a Quebec thing anymore. I've been in this for a while, and when you used to do these kinds of surveys, you get pretty difficult numbers always in the province of Quebec for the reasons that you can anticipate. And sometimes you get Newfoundland would be feeling like it was outside of the Canadian experience. But now we're seeing it in other provinces too, and in fact, strongest in Alberta.
I wonder, too, in this poll, when you ask people beyond saying, so many, 70% think Canada's broken, do people point out anything that's hopeful in here?
We didn't really see anything that was particularly hopeful in this survey, but in a number of surveys over the last while, people are really feeling that things are not headed in the right direction. And as a result of that, the way that we mediate these things, even though you don't want to talk about politics, is really through the political process. So you want to understand why the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party are not doing particularly well at the moment. And you can start here with this poll. Yeah,
you also have a question here about, and it was asked, I guess, of these people taking the poll, speaking positively about Canada to those not from Canada. What does that mean? How did that play out?
Well, 27% said they were less likely to do that than they used to be in the past, and that's up 13 points in the last 5 years. So we can't even speak well of ourselves to people in other places. I mean, how many of us are going to be wearing, maple leafs on our backpacks, particularly younger Canadians, as they go through the rest of the world? I mean, this is something that, you even go back to like commercials like the Joe Canadian rant and those kinds of things, where something we would kind of stand up and say quite proudly, well, at the moment, we're not feeling that way. At least not to the extent we used to.
Yeah, and that's up significantly as well, right, from even 5 years ago.
From 5 years ago, up 13 points.
Wow. I don't know. It's kind of a sad, regardless of your political stance here, when you hear and read figures like these, it just seems sad from so many different perspectives, right? It's not about, and again, you can't not talk about this and bring in politics, but something has happened here, and if you have to look around, I mean, there's only one government in power, and this has all happened under their watch. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. We're on, by the way, we're on Justin Trudeau resignation watch here, Darrell, just so you know.
Well, I think a lot of people are on that right now, but I'm sure CJAD is leading the way.
Well, we're here to make sure that if and when it happens, we have it first. Darrell, I thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks you so much for having me.
You bet. Take care. Darrell Bricker over at IPSOS. That's pretty dramatic, isn't it? In 5 years to see that many people who have basically said, no, I agree with what Pierre Poilievre said. Doesn't mean you agree with Pierre Poilievre, but that reference to Canada being broken and to not speaking positively about a country, that's something that would never even enter my mind. I mean, if you're somewhere else in the world or you meet someone from somewhere else in the world, this is still one of the greatest countries in the world. But people, what do you say, up from 13% to now 27%? That's I don't know. I don't know what that word is other than sad. I don't understand it. And I also don't understand, it's not a kind of a problem that can be fixed necessarily by flicking a switch. Our election here is probably not going to happen for at least another year. You kind of wonder how much worse it can get, or is this as bad as it's going to get and it starts to look better from here?